one thing that John Wilner of the Wilner Hotline, the San Jose Mercury News, longtime Pac-12 watcher. Now he covers the various former Pac-12 schools and their new conferences. So that obviously includes USC. One thing he mentioned earlier today being Wednesday, we record our show, USC Trojans Primetime Live, every Wednesday at 10 p.m. in the East, 7 p.m. Pacific. So one thing John Wilner said earlier on Wednesday, May 21st, was that the Big Ten and the SEC want to do their non-conference series, so that the Big Ten and SEC teams can get a nice little Power 4 win on their resume, which looks so much better than an FCS cupcake such as the Citadel, or for a lot of Big Ten teams schedule MAC programs, the Mid-American Conference. So the Big Ten and the SEC have been discussing their series. So that is kind of a monkey wrench that gets in the way of the plan for USC or any other team to have your one really big and difficult non-conference game, and then you schedule 2 cupcakes. USC would have Notre Dame and then the Big Ten SEC series. So that's another impediment. So Ethan, in terms of just scheduling in general, not so much USC specifically, but scheduling in general, I wrestle with these questions all the time. I've been covering college football for a living for nearly 25 years, and obviously a fan since the early 1980s. So all my life, I've been, passionate about this sport. So I think about these things all the time. To me, Ethan, one thing that could perhaps deal with the USC Notre Dame worries, but would also help the whole of college football, is that we need a revolution in scheduling and in terms of the architecture and flow of the season. And my specific thought along these lines, want to get your view of it. I think we need to start the season in early August now. I think that, if you start the season in early August, what does this achieve? It a lot of things. Let's start first with ESPN gets an August full of college football inventory, Fox as well. So there's money to be made if you do that. But the other obvious product of starting the season in early to mid-August, and you have 3 or 4 more college football Saturdays, is you can have 2. Every team would have at least 2 off weeks, and some would have 3. Actually, if you started early enough in August, every team would have 3 off weeks over the course of the full season. And the thought process there, it's not very hard to understand. With a 16-team playoff, presumably starting next season, 2026, you're asking every playoff team to win 4 games on top of the conference championship game and your 12 regular season games. So you'll be asking every team to win 17 games to win the national championship. So if you're going to have 17 games, which is really NFL territory in terms of workload, you might as well spread this thing out. Why keep it scrunched up and bunched up? You might as well expand the calendar, which, it's a very NFL-like thing to do. Own the calendar, occupy more real estate, but you're giving players more breaks. So some might say, oh, why are you making players play in summer? Well, first off, if you're going to be playing in August, you're going to be playing night games. All right. So that would be part of this. It would be a heavy night schedule. And you could also do some really fun things like an all-night college football marathon. Like you play a game in Corvallis at 6 p.m., you play a game in Seattle at 10, and then you play the Hawaii game at 2 a.m., and then you could play someplace in the East or Midwest at 6 a.m. when it's cool, when hot temperatures are not a factor. So you could do some creative TV things. But really, Ethan, the larger point is, I think it's time to expand the calendar, not the number of games, because that's happening already with the 16-team playoff. That's not my idea. That's not something I wanted. I thought 12 was pretty good, and I thought 8 actually would work pretty nicely. I'm not really a fan of 16. So this is not, the 16 teams in the playoff is not my thing. But if you're going to have a 16-team 4-round playoff, you might as well create a longer stretch from August through November so that players get these built-in breaks before you're going to be asking them to play a conference title game and then 4 playoff games in December, January. And so if that happened, I'm thinking about this nationally, but USC versus Notre Dame, you would be able to have an off week every year, either before or after the USC Notre Dame game, which would address the specific concern of the grind and having to play the Big Ten and Notre Dame. That could be a way for USC to address the Notre Dame question, but I'm really thinking about benefiting the sport of college football as a whole. I think it's time for a revolution in scheduling. Your thought?
I largely agree. I have one counterpoint that I'm going to briefly bring up, which is I think I'm only thinking about it because I just graduated from college. But if you start in early August, there's not going to be really any students around, which is probably part of why they haven't considered this in the past. USC historically starts around the week of August 20th. And then like a week later is the first football game. They kind of let students get settled in for a week. And then if they play a week 0 game, it's the next week. Maybe it's the following week, depending, whatever. So I think that is something that you kind of lose as students being on campus. And, at schools like USC, that is super important because unfortunately, I don't think a lot of students would come otherwise because USC, especially the student fan base, which is something that I've been outspoken about in my time and have tried to make changes to. The USC student fan base is pretty fair weather, to be honest with you. And I really wish that they were more involved and more excited about it and not just in it for the party and actually in it because they cared about the football. So I think that that's something that you lose at a lot of universities. I don't think that's going to matter for a lot of SEC schools like, Alabama, Tennessee, where the students are going to show up anyway, even if, it's a month until classes start, especially because they have a lot of in-state students. With USC, you're getting a lot of international students, you're getting a lot of out-of-state students. So a lot of, the student body isn't even in state, let alone on campus. So I think that could be a potential issue with moving forward with that idea. But I do think that largely the benefits do outweigh the detriments. I'm thinking about student athletes and, getting them started on the season a little bit sooner and having those breaks, like you said, would probably allow them to handle their academic workload a little bit better, which is kind of nice. And I also think that the weather component is something to think about. If you get some of these games done in August, and like you said, at night, if we're being smart about it, you're not worrying about playing games in, late November when it's freezing cold. You can get some of the Indianas and the Rutgers and all those schools out in the way in August rather than playing them in, a time when there's a risk of snow or just general cold weather conditions. And, USC doesn't want to be a school that's scared of cold weather conditions, and neither does any school. Nobody wants to have that reputation. But I think every school, even the schools that are comfortable in cold weather, will admit that, it's the cold weather brings a challenge, and sometimes it's entertaining. It's fun to watch on TV and stuff, but it, there's no football player that would say it's easier to play in the snow than to play, and when it's 60, 70 degrees out. Obviously, that's an easier situation to play football in. So I think that there are potential benefits, kind of like the ones that you laid out. I just think that the main losers in that situation would be the students, which, is a problem for some campuses anyway. Like UCLA is on the quarter system, so they start their season long before students come to campus, and it obviously shows in their attendance because nobody goes.
I was just about to say, how many students are banging the doors to see UCLA football?
Yeah, I mean, not a lot go during the season because it's so far away from the campus as it is. But it becomes even worse when you're not on campus at all, getting like the shuttle over to the Rose Bowl or whatever. So, I mean, I just worry that's my biggest worry. I worry, and it's unfortunate that I have to worry about that with USC students, but I really do. I worry that if USC was playing 2 or 3 games at home before students got to campus, that USC is already struggling to fill the Coliseum, it would become even more of a problem, especially if these are the the Georgia Southerns of the world, you're going to be looking at an even emptier Coliseum, which is really unfortunate, but it's a reality that we have to deal with in this kind of day and age of USC football fandom.
All right. Well, we tried to say as much as we could about USC Notre Dame and the series and the thought processes and the calculus and the chess moves. It's not a finalized story. The story has not run its course. We're going to see what USC and Notre Dame ultimately agree on. Obviously, the 16-team playoff format and how that's going to work, that's going to play a role in it. So this is a continuing conversation, but we obviously wanted to spend a considerable amount of time on it because that is the main story for USC football fans, also Notre Dame football fans right now.